Hey, everybody, it's Scott Steen with winnersandwhiners.com coming to you with the Thursday edition of Today in Sports Betting. And man, this is going to be a fight heavy week because once again, Today in Sports Betting is going to be talking about some UFC. And man, I have got a couple of UFC sharpshooters on today. Of course, my regular co-host is joining us, Scott Reichel, coming from Long Island, New York. Scott, happy Thursday. How are you, man?
Doing pretty well. It's going to be fun talking UFC once again. It's always fun to have 3 fight cards in the span of about 8 days, which is a little bit unprecedented. And it's a lot of content that I'd say all of us need, whether or not we're sports bettors or just regular sports fans. It's always nice to have more live sports that aren't taking place at 4 in the morning. So,
Yeah,
looking forward to it.
totally agree. And joining us is going to be our UFC/esports expert down there from the great state of Mississippi. He is winning Willie. How are you, bud?
What's going on, fellas? Back again.
Back again, man. We just had a nice little card last night. We'll do a quick recap of that. Scott, you want to sum up last night's card in one word?
Inconsistent from my betting perspective. I mean, overall, it was a fun card. I mean, there's not really much else to say. You had a couple of decisions that the judges seemed a bit iffy on. Not based on who won, but just based on some of the scores that were given out. Early on, I started off the card with 2 tough losses, bounced back, ended up going up roughly 5 and change units, and then I pretty much handed it right back to the sportsbook at the end. But I finished the fight card up roughly 0.75 units, which isn't much to brag about, but at the end of the day, it's always good to be in the green, and I was slightly in the green, so it could be worse.
Absolutely. We talked to earlier before we went on the air about there's many times that people would be happy with leaving the sports book for the day up 0.75 units. Willie, did you make many plays yesterday? Did you do any good?
I'm pretty sure the only pick I got right yesterday was Sarge. So looking to rebound this weekend.
Cheesecake took a beating. Just never went well for Cheesecake, as Scott and I suspected.
Well, we talked about that perfectly. We said if she was that big of a favorite and it was that much of a favorite to go to a decision, why wouldn't you just take Eubanks by decision? I thought it would be around 150. It was 115. And that was an absolute bloodbath. I mean, that was a murder.
Yeah, not good. Not good at all. So, all right. So let's move on with the third card in 8 days, right? We got, once again, a Saturday card. We had the Wednesday card. This is, you guys were talking a little bit before we came on the air. There are some deep backbenchers in this one. Let's just say it's not entirely made up of the A team on the roster there at UFC. So we'll start with we'll go through it. We'll start with the undercard. All these fights are going to be available on regular ESPN. Did we decide, or ESPN plus ESPN plus? Are you gonna need the plus to see the main card?
I'm pretty sure it's going to be all regular ESPN this Saturday. I personally think the UFC should have done that also yesterday. People were making arguments on Twitter. Of course, it's because they wanted free programming. But at the end of the day, ESPN was re-airing the end of the 2015 NBA Finals between the Warriors and the Cavs.
Right.
And I'm thinking, why wouldn't you want live television with ratings for UFC? I know, of course, it has to do with improving your subscription base, but really? You didn't want live programming with millions of people watching you on regular ESPN? I found that move a little bit peculiar.
It really seemed like an odd move because it was a card that it probably wasn't going to inspire a lot of people to make that to make that impulse purchase of ESPN Plus just based on last night. So
but the viewings would have been good on regular ESPN. I mean, people would have just watched it no matter what.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, so let's talk about this Saturday's fight. We're going to start off on the prelim card. Start off with Rodrigo Nascimento Ferrari against Don'Tale Mayes. Winning Willie, you are the guest today. Why don't you start us off, my friend? What do you think about this one? Little heavyweight bout to get us rocking and rolling for the evening.
I think this will be a good start to the event. You got Mayes, who's 4 of his 7 wins have come from a KO or TKO in his professional career, and he's got to rely on his power and size here to win. He's going against Nascimento Ferreira, who is making his debut in the UFC, carrying a 7-0 undefeated record. And he's interestingly enough, none of his fights have gone the distance. So something to watch out for there. I think I like the underdog here. I see Nascimento Vieira at plus 105, and I think that he has the chance to submit Mays early here.
Okay, and that's actually a good price because I've got him on. I'm looking. I've got my bookie up today, and I've got Dontel Mays at minus 125 and Nascimento at minus 105. So catching a plus price on him is good value if that's the way you want to lean. Scott, you feeling the same way about these two big boys? You know, Dontel Mays has only gone to the decision 29% of the time, almost 3/4 of the time he puts them down on the canvas with either a knockout or a submission. Are you thinking that's going to go that way again, either one way or the other?
Well, for a decent amount of these fights on the early prelims, I didn't have much of an opinion on. Having said that, the first fight between these two fighters, I actually agree with Willie. I think Willie pretty much hit it on the head here. We said how it's not 18 quality, but I personally love it when a plan comes together. And I feel like Ferreira is definitely going to try to submit Mays, and that will be his game plan. And I think he should be successful in that area. Now, one thing you have to worry about is that Mays, being 6'6", 262 pounds, has a decent size advantage on Ferreira, who's 6'3", 246 pounds. So you have to worry about the stand-up, and I think that Kong, which is Mays' nickname, should be trying to keep it in the stand-up, try to use his reach advantage and his height to try to keep Ferreira from taking it down. However, stylistically, this fight actually reminds me a lot of the Johnson-Moises fight that we saw yesterday, despite the completely different weight class, where Johnson was going to do whatever he could to keep it in the stand-up, and Moises was going to do whatever he could to take it to the ground. And even though Johnson looked really good in the first round, as soon as Moises took it to the ground, it was over. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see in this fight as well. Ferreira, if you are 7-0 and 5 of your 7 wins have come by submission within the first and second round, I think that this could be a potentially long night for the favorite here with Mays. I think if Ferreira takes it to the ground, I think it's over. So from that perspective, I wish that some of the sports books had some lines up, kind of the same issue that we ran into when we did the show for yesterday. For yesterday's card earlier in the week, where I wanted to give out specific exact results, but a lot of sports books, if not all of them, did not have any lines up. And that's the same case that it is now. I don't know what the line would be for Ferreira by submission, but that's definitely where I'm going to be leaning for this fight.
Yeah, and that's I was going to ask Willie about that. You know, Scott likes to make those value plays and picking the exact result, and you know his logic certainly checks out. Willie, are you kind of the same way, or do you just tend to stick more to the money lines or the over/under as far as the rounds go?
Well, I'll typically just stay to the money line or the totals unless it's just an extremely juicy play, and I don't mind laying juice, but I try to avoid it when I can.
Right.
That's why I do exact results, because I feel like most of the fights you generally have a decent gauge on where you think a fight's going to go if a specific fighter is going to win. And even with yesterday, I had all plus money plays besides one, and it was Eubanks by decision at minus 115, because I thought that was definitely going to happen, and that clearly did. But it has its perks. Assuming that you actually can somewhat predict on how the fight's going to end, then usually you can set yourself up for some profitable spots. And that's why even yesterday, for example, I had a losing record overall, but because all the picks I gave out were for plus money, I still made profit. So you have a little bit more leeway instead of just taking constant minus 145, minus 150 stuff. You can get that same fighter at, I don't know, plus 130, plus 140. And I feel like that just has a lot of value in its own right.
All right, very good. Okay, so let's move on to the next fight of the evening. This is going to be I believe it's going to be a welterweight fight between these two gentlemen. And you've got one guy that's got a lot more experience than the other one. And the nice part about this fight, I like for rookies like myself, both of these guys have been nice enough to tattoo their nicknames on their chest. So it's going to be easy to pick out who is who. As Darren the Damage Elkins goes up against Nate the Train Landwehr. Darren Elkins, like I said, he's kind of a veteran, 25-8 is his overall record, while Landwehr is making just his second appearance in the UFC. But the odds makers, they do have this one pretty close at Elkins minus 120 and Landwehr minus 110. Scott, do you have any leans on this welterweight tussle?
I believe it's featherweight It's not going to be
You're right. You're right. You're right.
But in terms of the actual fight, this is one of those fights where in terms of a value play, I really don't see much. However, I do think that even though Landwehr has been known to finish some opponents as he has 8 knockout victories, he still has had 6 of his 16 fights go to decision, and Elkins, during the course of his long UFC career, has been mostly a decision magnet as he has gone to a decision 16 times. I think there's a shot that this fight ends early, but at the end of the day, I expect this fight to go to decision, being in the minus heavy juice with regard to maybe the low minus 200s, high -1, I'd say 80s or 90s. But if you wanted to go value, maybe take whoever you liked in the fight to win by decision. But if I don't really see much value here, I'm going to lean to the over. I just think this fight's going to go the distance.
Willie, you concur? You got a little different spin you want to share?
I don't have a huge feeling about this fight, but if I'm forced to play this, I'm going to play with Landwehr, however you pronounce his name. He's his 13-3 professional record with 8 wins from KO TKO is impressive to me. I just don't think that Elkins has much left in the tank at this point. So if I was to play this, I would probably look for as Scott said, to go to decision prop, or maybe even Landwehr by KO or TKO.
Okay. And that brings up a point just kind of for us novices. And with you talk about his professional record, UFC obviously sort of the top division here, but he's just 0-1 in the UFC, but he does have 16 professional fights. So how do you go about capping those lower divisions? I'm assuming what division, what organization would that be that he's doing most of his fighting in before he came to UFC?
Well, if you wanted to actually break down which organization he's been in, he's jumped around a little bit, but he was mostly in the M1 Challenge Series. He was also in Fight Time Promotions. He's been around a lot of different organizations. Now, in terms of how good the fighters are in those organizations, definitely beneath the quality of the UFC. That's definitely a given. Having said that, I would say that personally, when I handicap fights, I don't really focus much on the fighters that he faced back then. The way that I view it is I mostly just look at what the fighter is good at. I'll look at some highlights on YouTube. I'll look at some statistics, and I'll try to see if his style of fight is, I'd say, a bad matchup for the UFC veteran. Now, of course, the UFC is not dumb. They're not just going to immediately throw out a guy who's 0-1 in the UFC and have him fight against somebody in the UFC who's actually very good. They're going to try to make it a good matchup, and Elkins has lost each of his last 3 fights. Now, having said that, Elkins does have the experience. He has fought against tougher competition, but you also have to wonder if he really has much left. I feel like Willie touched upon that pretty well. Elkins is 35. He's lost each of his last 3 fights. Really hasn't been looking good at all, and you have to kind of wonder how that's going to work out. So I'd say instead of focusing more on the quality of competition that the fighters have been, that the underdog or the newcomer has gone up against, I'd rather focus on the fight style and try to determine how that will fare against a specific opponent in this fight. I think that's more important.
All right, that's solid. All right, so let's move on to the third bout there on the undercard. This is a match between the ladies. This is looks like a ladies. What is it? Flyweight. It is a flyweight bout here between Courtney Cast Iron Casey, and coming all the way over from Italy is Maravella Romero Borello. Two pretty well seasoned fighters here going at it, but the odds makers have made Casey a pretty good favorite here. She checks in at -170, while Borello is +140. Scott, tell us about the chicks.
So for this fight, I actually like the dog here, and for value, I'm going to take Borello by decision. I think there's a pretty good plus price there, and I think that it's worth it. If you actually want to break down both fighters, I mean, Borello's 12-7, Casey's 8-7. Borello's lost 3 of her last 4 fights, so she hasn't been good at all lately. I'm not going to sugarcoat that and say that she's actually been better than no, she hasn't been good. But I just don't think Casey's a good enough fighter to actually be laying this type of price. And the reason why I say that is that Casey's also lost 3 of her last 4, so both these fighters have been in terrible form lately. And if you want to actually break down the results here, Casey might be better in terms of the knockout submission stuff because she has 3 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 2 decision wins. Casey in decisions is 2-6, and Barella in decisions is 5-2. So Casey is awful when it comes to actually acquiring points on scorecards. And if Barella can get to a decision based on results, she should be able, at least based on her track record, to do more to get points on scorecards. I just don't trust Casey to win by decision because, historically speaking, she is almost a guaranteed loss at every decision that she goes to. So you can give me an underdog there. Of course, Casey has a shot at winning inside the distance, which I think could be an issue. But for value alone, I don't know how you don't take the underdog here in Barella to win by decision for a plus price. I mean, it's plus 140 for her to win by decision. Should probably be somewhere in the high 270s, potentially 300 range. I got to take that. That's a good flyer.
Okay, that's solid because Barella does go to a decision, like you said, 42% of the time. And when that does go to decision, she's winning roughly 3/4 of them. So, yeah, that appears to be a pretty strong value play right there. Willie, what do you think on this one?
I have to agree with Scott here. I'm not – again, I don't have a very huge feel on this fight because I do feel like it can go either way in the end. But there's 3 things that really stick out to me about this fight that lean me towards the underdog, and that's that Casey has not fought in over a year, so you got to wonder if she'll be a little rusty there. She's also lost 3 of her last 4 fights. I mean, Romero Barella has also lost her last 2 fights, but she has the better defense between the two. And I think that's going to end up making the difference here in this fight.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, let's move on. Take a look at featherweight bout between Mike Davis and Giga. Oh, man. Giga Chikadze. Mike.
Good to me.
What's that?
Sounded good to me.
Okay. Mike Davis is, of course, the Beast Boy, while Chikadze has yet to come up with a nickname. Mike Davis is from the United States, and Chikadze is from the former satellite country of the USSR. He is from Georgia, one of these Eastern European fighters. Willie, you got a feel on this one? It looks like the odds makers have made it. Davis, once again, the U.S. fighter, is better than a 2-1 favorite at minus 210. You get a little value there on Giga at plus 170. Willie, find us some money there.
I'm looking towards the underdog again when forced to play this, but I personally want nothing to do with this fight. Both of these guys are great strikers. They're both pretty good all-around fighters, but this has the makings to be a slug match, I think, and it's the only thing I think that really leans me to the underdog the most is probably just the fact that he is the better ground fighter of the two, and he does have a very small 1.5-inch reach advantage. But again, personally, I don't want anything to do with this fight just because it's going to be a slugfest.
Yeah, in fact, it looks like in Mike Davis's UFC career, he has never gone to a decision. So there's a good chance that this one's going to be over early. Scott, you seeing it the same way?
Yeah, I have no real interest in picking this card. I mean, he's only been mentioning Beast Boy real quick. I know that he's only been in the UFC for 2 fights, but in his entire career, he's only gone to decision once. So he's kind of known for being a quick finisher in this fight. I do agree with the point that Willie made. I do think the underdog here is the better fighter on the ground. So I think if it comes down to wrestling, I think that Giga will do enough to potentially win a round or 2 just by sitting on Davis. I am a little bit concerned, though, because Davis does appear to be a bit of a step up in competition for Giga, and Giga has won each of his last 2 fights by split decision, which makes me believe that he hasn't exactly been the most dominating fighter if his last 2 fights have gone to split decision, which is basically a coin flip. I think this fight's going to be very close. Giga does have 2 submission victories, so I know that he has the ability to potentially submit Davis, but at first glance, I thought Davis, before I looked at the lines, I thought that Davis would be a favorite in the realm of, I'd say, minus 140, minus 135, and now he's roughly minus 210. I think that's a little bit too high, so I don't have much of an interest to pick the favorite. Having said that, this is an easy pass for me. I'm not really interested in this fight. I think that the value is on the underdog. but I don't know what his odds of actually winning are. I think Davis is the better fighter. So I think this is a good pass for me.
And that does bring us to a point. It's a good rule of thumb, not just in the UFC, but in all sports, especially in these times where we don't have a lot of options to bet on. You might feel like you got to force a play. You got to make a play because it's on. That's the great thing about these UFC fights. Most of them don't take long. And there's another one right behind it. So if you don't feel anything, if you don't have a feel for this one, if you're just trying to force a play, keep your powder dry and fire your shots at the next fight.
You can also live bet it. You have that option where if you wanted to see how these fighters look early on just to see how they stack up, of course you might have to pay some heavy juice. But at the end of the day, let's just say Davis is minus 210 and you watch the first round and you see that Davis is clearly the better fighter. You can potentially get an in-game in, I don't know, maybe minus 275, minus 300 range. It's a lot of juice, but if you know that he's up 1-0 and you think he's the superior fighter, it's dangerous, but you can also get action in after you see how these fighters, react or interact with each other. That's always an option.
Right. And, more people that are more perceptive than I am, I'm sure, made some nice live bet money on that Azure fight as he just dominated the first round and a half. I'm sure you could have got a good price. I don't remember who he was fighting. It was the other guy.
Kelleher.
That's right. I'm sure you could have got a good live price on Kelleher. And as Kelleher survived the onslaught and basically let him tire himself out, kind of rope-a-doped him, and just took it to him there in the later round. So, yeah, that's a great point there. Very good. All right, so moving on with the so-called undercard, we're going to take a look at a middleweight bout between Anthony Hernandez and Kevin Holland. Anthony Hernandez, perhaps the worst name. We talked about Cheesecake being a terrible nickname. Anthony Hernandez's nickname is, you know what it is? Either one of you guys?
I know what it is. That's because I looked it up beforehand. I wouldn't have known what it was before.
Willie, you know it?
Yeah, the same reason too.
It is Fluffy. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. That is a terrible nickname. He is 6 foot, 185 pounds. Looking at his picture, he is in no way fluffy. Going against Kevin Trailblazer Holland. Yeah, okay. That's when you're up against Fluffy. Trailblazer sounds awfully good. Anthony Hernandez just has 8 UFC bouts under his belt, while Kevin Holland is 17-5 over his UFC career. There's just a serious reach advantage on the side of Kevin Holland, as he has a 6-inch reach advantage over Fluffy, and that has been reflected a little bit in the price, but this is a pretty even bout according to the odds makers. Hernandez minus 120, Holland minus 110. Scott, does Fluffy get it done here as the favorite?
The truth is that I don't want to sound repetitive. I don't really have much of an opinion on this fight. I think this fight is actually worth roughly a pick'em price for both sides. Both fighters definitely have a formula to win this fight. And when I say that, Holland's going to do whatever he can to keep it in the stand-up, and Fluffy's going to do whatever he can to take it to the ground. And I feel like that's kind of a given based on the results of Hernandez in his career. Now, what I was going to say is that if you wanted to look for Hernandez to win, I personally think he'll win by submission. I think that if this goes to a decision, I would lean to Holland, because I think Holland would do a better job at winning pretty much every single stand-up interaction because of the series reach and height advantage that you talked about before. Having said that, the fact that Hernandez is favored makes me believe that they're a little bit skeptical on Holland's takedown defense, and they're a little bit skeptical on his submission defense, as he's been submitted twice in his career. For me, if I had to lean one way, I would probably lean to Hernandez by submission, but I have to wait to see what the prices are to see if it's worth it or not. But since Hernandez is favored and since he is a submission expert, I think you're probably better off from a value perspective on taking him to win by submission instead of taking him to win at minus 120.
Yeah, that appears to be a pretty solid play because, Hernandez, the average fight time for him is just 6 minutes and 7 seconds, while Holland is 14:42. That is quite a disparity there, and obviously somebody that wants to get you on the ground. And, when you have a reach disadvantage like that, the last thing you want to do is turn it into some kind of a stand-up bout, which I think, just like you said, definitely gives Trailblazer Holland the advantage. Willie, you got this one broken down about the same way?
I'm actually on the other side of the fence of this one. I like Holland in this fight. You got
Okay.
Hernandez, the submission specialist, with 7 career wins and 5 by submission. On the other hand, you got Holland with 16 career professional wins, 7 KO TKO wins, and 6 by submission. And what makes me lean to Holland is just the fact that, one, he's got the advantage with the reach, and he's a versatile fighter. Hernandez is sort of a one-trick pony, while Holland has wins from both submission and in the stand-up game as well. So I'm leaning towards Holland with this fight.
All right. So you're counting on Holland to be able to stay off the ground and keep it in a stand-up situation there and use his reach advantage to ultimately wear out Hernandez. Because, that's the one thing I would question about Hernandez with the short fight time is whether or not he has the stamina to go the distance with Holland and ultimately prove victorious. So, Scott, is this something you'll be looking at to make a live play in as well?
Potentially. I said before I don't really have any real plans on betting this fight because I think that it's really a battle of conflicting styles. It's just a matter of which style you think is going to pay off. I agree that Holland is the more well-rounded fighter, but at the end of the day, we saw what happened with Moises and Michael Johnson yesterday. At some point, Holland clearly, even though he is decent in the ground game, he wants to keep this in the stand-up. And you know that if this ends up going to the ground, Hernandez has a significant advantage on the ground. Whereas if it's in the stand-up, Holland knows he can pretty much piece Fluffy apart in the stand-up. So if you wanted to actually look to potentially betting both sides of the equation, which is a little bit of a dangerous proposition, but I know Fox Bet actually gives you some double result options where you can take, for example, Holland by knockout or decision at like plus 140 or so, and you could potentially get Hernandez by submission or decision at plus 140 also. So if you wanted to potentially bet both sides of the coin in the same fight, which is a little bit dangerous, they're both at plus money. And if you think that there's no chance that Holland submits Hernandez, which I think that there's no chance of that happening, and if you think that there's no chance of Hernandez winning by knockout, which I don't think is going to happen either, you could potentially find some plus value on both sides, and you basically hedge against yourself for free profit potentially.
Okay.
I mean,
all right.
It's dangerous because you could lose twice on the same fight. But I think that Willie and I would agree both fighters are pretty much going to win either one way or another. Holland's either going to win by decision or by knockout, and Hernandez either going to win by submission or decision. Do we agree on that, Willie?
Yeah.
So that's
all right. Very
on plus price.
Very good. All right, moving on to the last bout of the undercard. It is a welterweight match between Matt the Immortal Brown and Miguel. Here we go. Carmel Thunder Beza, both of them coming from the United States.
Now that's a nickname. That's a
what's
nickname.
That is a nickname. It's no Vanilla Gorilla.
That's
but
better.
It's not bad.
Yeah, Vanilla Gorilla won. I don't know how you can bet against that nickname, and I mean that's a good one. I mean, Fluffy set the bar pretty low. I don't know if it's worse than Cheesecake, but it's definitely down there. That's a good nickname. So I'll give him some courtesy. I'll give him a shout out. Clearly, he's not going to be watching this, but I'll give you a shout out for the nickname.
Well, and it's a good chance that Matt Brown may be immortal because he has had 40 UFC fights and is still standing, while Miguel Beza is perfect in his UFC career at 7-0. Willie, I guess the real question that we want to know as far as this one, is it caramel or is it caramel from Miguel Beza?
Well, we pronounce it caramel here, but we're Southern, so.
Okay. Is it pecan or pecan?
Pecan. Pecan.
All right, we're getting to the bottom of the real issues here. Caramel Thunder. Now I'm saying it totally wrong. I'm saying it's a combination of both ways. Caramel Thunder is minus 210, while Matt the Immortal Brown is plus 170. Willie, how are you breaking this one down?
I'm actually waiting on some prop bets to cut this juice down because I plan on riding with the favorite. I like Beza. I think Beza is a future champion with the brand, or whichever brand he's fighting with, he will be a champion. He's only 27 years old. He's undefeated, has dangerous hands and explosive power. And this is going to be by far his toughest challenge. But he's going against a 39-year-old, and you really got to wonder how much does a 39-year-old that's been fighting with UFC since 2008 have left? He has won 2 straight, but I think that's going to end here.
Okay. All right. Very good. Scott, let me guess. You're going to pass on this one.
Well, I mean, if you want to mock me, you can, but I feel like that's honestly a smart move in this fight. I think it could go either way. I don't really know much about Baiza. I can't say that I'm as high on him as Willie is because, to be honest, I don't really know much about him. But I do know having an undefeated record tends to be a pretty good thing in the sport. So I have figured that out during the course of, my handicapping. That usually, if you haven't had any losses yet, you tend to be a decent fighter. That's one of those pro tips that I can offer you here. But no, in reality, though, looking at this fight, I think it's really a close matchup because Brown, even though he has 16 losses, 10 are by submission. So he's awful when it comes to ground defense. Having said that, Baiza has 0 submission wins and 0 submission losses, so he's not really much of a ground guy. He's kind of exclusively a stand-up fighter, which is what Brown is. So I really think both these fighters are going to trade a lot. I don't think it's going to be to the same level as Linz and Arlovsky yesterday, where they were just constantly swinging. But I wouldn't be surprised to see both fighters continuously throwing punches in the stand-up. And I think this fight could be a lot closer than people think it's going to be. Now, based on the recent results, I mean, you could say how much Brown has left in the tank, but, I mean, he's done pretty well. I mean, winning each of your last 2 fights, Diego Sanchez a couple years ago was still a decent fighter, not really so much anymore, won by knockout, and then he beat Ben Saunders. His 3 losses before that, you have Damian Maia, who's one of the greatest submission artists of all time. You have Jake Ellenberger, who was pretty good before he left the UFC, and you had Cowboy Cerrone, and he went to 3 rounds against Cerrone. I actually think there's some value with Brown here because Baiza doesn't really do much with the ground, and that's Brown's kryptonite. So I think in the stand-up, I think this fight should be closer to a pick-em, if I'm being honest, because both fighters prefer not to go to the ground. I think Baiza should be a slight favorite, maybe minus 125, minus 130. But at that price, I have to lean to Brown here. I think there's just too much value on it.
Out there hunting value. Very good, and that's a very good strategy in any sport, but especially ones where you don't have a strong feel. Go ahead and hunt that value, play the underdog, and see if things break right. After all, he is immortal. 40 fights, and you're still fighting on the undercard. Is that the sign of not a great career?
Well, you got to wait until we get to the main fight for this card because he blows 40 fights out of the water. So you got to wait till we get to Overeem. That's all. Okay. That's all I'm saying. But no, I mean, it's a bad thing if Anthony Smith as well has had a ton of fights, and he was younger than Teixeira, but he's fought more than Teixeira. It was a really weird situation there. I mean, some of these fighters just want that payday, and they love the feeling of going into an octagon and just beating another guy into submission. It's just it's a thing. And Brown, even though he might have lost a step or two, the fact that he's won each of his last 2, Brown has been known in the UFC for putting together some very entertaining fights during his career because of his just willingness to never surrender. And I think that from a will perspective, he definitely has one of the most recognizable wills in the entire UFC. So
I'm just curious from a layman standpoint here, if either one of you guys know, what does a guy like that make for an undercard fight? What kind of money are they making?
Well, the UFC tends to actually release how much fighters get paid for each fight. I would probably assume somewhere in the realm of maybe 40K, give or take.
Okay.
I mean, it really depends on a couple of factors. If they're getting any bonuses, if they're new to the UFC or if they've been around for a while, they have a fan base, stuff like that. For this fight, I would have to assume Brown's getting paid more than Baiza. I would have to assume as much.
And these guys are able to fight, what, 4 times a year, 6 times a year?
Well, no, I'd say maximum 3 times a year, mostly twice.
Okay, so that's a hard road to hoe for $100,000.
Correct.
Okay,
that's why the bonuses mean a lot to these fighters.
Yeah, you're talking about the bonuses for wins, knockdowns, that sort of thing?
Yes, or? Like the knockout of the night's like 50K, fight of the night's usually in the realm of 75K, give or take. Even have submission of the night, that kind of stuff. So these bonuses definitely help the fighters pay some bills, so to speak.
Okay, very good. All right, so let's move on to the main card, starting off with the 14th ranked contender against the 15th ranked contender there in the featherweight division, as a Song Yadong goes up against Marlon Chito Vera from Ecuador. Song Yadong is from China, And both of these guys have pretty good records. Song, 15-1-1 with 1 no contest, while Marlon Vera is 15-5-1. Scott, what do you think about this one?
Well, first of all, we have to have a brief debate on who has the better nickname. I'm gonna go with Yadong here. Kung Fu Monkey is a top tier nickname. That is a phenomenal nickname.
They do not have that listed on the UFC's website. So
Kung Fu Monkey. That is a phenomenal nickname. I got to give full props.
I don't even think we need to have a debate about Kung Fu Monkey versus Cheeto. I like
Caramel Thunder is a pretty good one, but
yeah, absolutely.
But seriously, when it comes to this fight, I also think this fight's gonna be very close. That's why I said going in before we went on air, I think this card will be entertaining, but in terms of actual value prediction stuff, I think it's going to be very tough for a couple of fights because some of these at first glance look pretty even. And even though Yadong is currently on minus 170 favorite or so, a decent amount of money has come in on Yadong already. Vera is still very good, definitely takes pride in the ground game, and he has the ability to submit people. But based on the fighters themselves, I've seen Yadong fight before. He's very good. Personally, in terms of actual associations with organizations that, train the fighters, Team Alpha Male is usually in the upper echelon in terms of teams. And I think the fact that he's a member of Team Alpha Male tells you all you need to know about his future as a candidate, or a contender, I should say. I know that we were talking before about some fighters who have the ability to potentially be serious contenders for a belt in the future. I know that he was very high on Baiza. I'm very high on Yadong. I think Yadong could be a serious contender in this organization. I think he could be a champion. You were going through the record. Yadong's only 22.
Holy mackerel.
He has the makings of being a serious contender to potentially win a belt or two, at least to fight for a belt in the future. Being 22, and according to Sherdog rankings, you're 15-4, with 1 win coming by, an illegal elbow or knee or something like that. 22 years old, he looks like a prodigy to me. I'll take Yadong here. I think Yadong should take care of business. In terms of the actual outcome, he has gone to decision a decent amount, which makes it a pretty tough method to call. Vera's also gone to decision 7 times. But Vera is 2-5 in decisions, so I am a bit concerned with his ability to rack up points on scorecards. If I had to lean anywhere for value, I'd probably take Yadong by decision.
Okay, very good. Willie, any value there on Cheeto at 3-2, or are you siding with the young phenom Yadong as well?
I'm actually only on a dog as well. I think this fight has the makings to be probably the best one on the card. Both of these guys are very talented, and they both appear to be on the path to success. Yadong was riding a 7-fight win streak until the controversial ending last time. He was docked in the first round for an illegal hit and looked like he was dominated the rest of the fight, but they still gave him a draw. On the other hand, Vera's won 5 straight. He has the better ground game here between the two, I believe. Mm-hmm. Even though Yadong is the better striker, and I love backing versatile fighters when the fights seem so close.
So just a question though for Willie, I agree, and that's why I think this fight's very tough because they both specialize in different areas. Does it concern you at all when it comes to taking an underdog, especially one that focuses so much on the ground game in Vera, when his decision record is 2-5? Does that concern you at all, or do you kind of just feel like it's submission or bust for Vera?
Well, not necessarily, because I can see this fight ending early. In this 5-fight win streak, he's got three technical knockout wins and 2 from submission. So he's not just a one-trick pony per se. Okay. He's definitely outmatched in the stand-up game here, but I think that his ground game kind of adds an extra element here that's going to end up making a difference.
Yeah, I mean, usually in these tough fights, I tend to lean decision because usually it's very tough to actually find much of a time where one of the two fighters can get a significant edge and almost end the guy. It is possible, of course. But based on the decision records here and the fact that I actually am just very high on Yadong for what I've seen from him and the fact that I actually think he will be a serious contender in the future, I think he'll win by decision. But I think it is possible that the underdog could win by submission or end the fight early. But since this fight is so close, I really think this could turn into a war for 15 minutes. Willie, do we agree on that?
Yeah, no doubt. I think this is going to be probably the best fight on the card. These guys are just so evenly matched. I don't understand why the juice is so strong either.
I agree. Yeah, that's the one area that I'm a little bit confused about, which is why I think Yadong will probably win, because there's been so much juice. For value, though, I would agree if you were looking from a money line perspective to lean to the underdog here. But if you can find Yadong by decision, maybe in the plus 200 range, ballpark, I think that's worth a play.
All right, very good. Willie, we're going to move on to a middleweight bout here between Eric Anders, Eric Yaboy Anders, and Krzysztof Jotko from Poland. As of this time, no nickname for that middleweight. Again, two pretty good records here. Anders 13-4, while Jotko checked in at 21-4. Both of these guys 6'1" tall, weighing roughly about 185. A little bit of a reach advantage there for the Pole. Willie, what do you think? What do you think about this one? We got a little action here. Jotko has been made the favorite at -170, while Yaboy is plus 140. Where's the value in this fight, winning, Willie?
I really don't have a huge feel either way on this fight. I think that this should be another pretty good fight. But there's a couple things that kind of separate Jotko here for me, and he said he has a 2-inch reach advantage, and he also is the better defender. And both of these guys have been on a very similar path. They both hit a rough stretch, but they've kind of turned things around here lately. I really don't know what to make of this fight, but I'm leaning towards the favorite here with Jotko. It's something in my gut tells me to ride him.
Okay. And Scott, I'm beginning to kind of pick up what you're putting down here, and I see that Jotko, almost 2/3 of his fights go to the distance. So maybe instead of laying that wood there at -170 with Jotko, we wait around and see if we can find Jotko by decision, if that's the way you like. Scott, are you on Jotko? Or you maybe you're going to think about cashing a ticket on the underdog here?
It's amazing how quickly you've turned into a sharp in UFC betting. I'm really impressed with how you've gone about, your progress with MMA.
A long way in a week.
Yeah, this fight, I think it's tough. I mentioned before the dangerous idea of potentially backing both fighters in specific outcomes, because you could lose both, but the odds of one of the two occurring are almost a given. Jotko not only goes to decisions the majority of the time, he's 14-1 in decisions. He's the decision king. Right. I mean, that's how I would phrase it. So the way that I see it is this fight goes one of two ways. Either Jotko wins by decision or Anders wins by knockout. I think those are the only two ways this fight ends. Looking at the actual fights, though, I actually like Anders by knockout. I think this is actually a decent spot to potentially take an underdog here. Jotko, I know he's a big decision guy, but overall, I know he might have a little bit of an advantage just based on experience. I don't know. I actually like Jotko as a fighter, but I think Anders has just a lot of power. I've seen him fight before, former football player actually, but he has a ton of power, and he's not afraid of ending fights early. I think this fight will be close. He's one of the only fighters who I've ever seen win by soccer kick knockout. That's actually how it was scored. I'm not really sure what that even means. But okay. He won by a soccer kick, so I guess that means, I don't know, he's got some versatility. But if I had to lean one way in this fight, I would probably lean to Anders by knockout, just solely based on the plus value you can get on underdog by knockout. But for me, I might actually play this fight both ways. I might actually take Anders by knockout and Jotko by decision, because I really think one of the two are going to occur.
And it doesn't worry you at all that you actually have a Polish middle fighting, and you could end up with a Polish middle.
I tell you what, that's not exactly very encouraging. But I really do think that Anders has a significant advantage in the stand-up. I know from a power perspective, I think Anders can pretty much take anybody's lights out as quickly as possible, with whether it's from kicking or just punching in general. Or Jotko, I mean, 14-1 decisions makes me believe you definitely know how to win a scorecard. But I also believe that you're not exactly trying to end the fight early. I feel like if you're going to 15 decisions, you are kind of trying to get to the decision, if you know what I mean. And I feel like Anders might do a little bit more to actually force the action. I think you can look to either way. Both of them should be at plus prices. I'm not saying it's a dangerous proposition to take a Polish middle in an MMA fight, but I really think either Andrews wins by knockout or Jutko wins by decision. I think those are the only two outcomes.
Well, and yeah, a full 2/3 of Andrews' fight have ended by a knockout or TKO. I just want to know if it was a soccer kick, if it was a bicycle kick, because that would be impressive.
I don't think so, but I really don't know. You have any thoughts on that idea, Willie?
No, I don't.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Good talk. All right, cool.
Quick and to the point. All right, so let's take a look at a featherweight bout here between Dan Ige and Edson Barboza. Dan Ige, 50K is his nickname, while Edson Jr. Barboza, I'm going to call that a push between two very uninspiring nicknames. Dan Ige is 13-2 in UFC, while Edson Barboza is 20-8. Barboza does hail from Brazil, so I'm assuming he's some sort of jiu-jitsu master, and he does hold a 4-inch height advantage and a 4-inch reach advantage. As far as the odds go for these guys, not surprisingly, Barboza is a favorite at -135, while Ige is plus 105. Scott, how you feeling this one?
For me, I actually like the underdog here. I think that there's a decent amount of value with EJ here. Simply put, yeah, I thought it was Ige also, and then I heard somebody pronounce it on yesterday's card, and apparently it's EJ, and I've been pronouncing it wrong the entire time. But either or, Barboza, kind of unlike most Brazilian fighters, really not a submission guy. He's pretty much exclusively a stand-up, I'd say, kickboxing karate master. That's kind of how I would phrase his entire career. He throws a lot of kicks, does a lot of stand-up stuff, not really known for being that great on the ground. It is worth mentioning, though, that Barboza is going to be switching weight classes for this fight. He is moving down after he had a couple of underwhelming results in rapid succession. He has lost 4 of his last 5. Pretty tough competition, though. You lose to Khabib, you lose to Kevin Lee, you beat Dan Hooker, you lose to Gaethje, you lose to Paul Felder. Pretty tough competition. So I'm not going to immediately roast Barboza for those results. But at the end of the day, I do think that EJ will have the advantage in this weight class because he has a lot more familiarity in this weight class. So I think that should be a good matchup for him. He's also won each of his last 5. I think this fight will be close, but EJ does have 5 wins by submission, and Barboza isn't the greatest on the ground. Do I think he will submit Barboza? No. But I think for value, I think EJ by decision is a very just nice value play. And that's the only way I'm going to lean here for this fight.
Willie, Scott's going a little dog hunting here. You feeling that as well?
I am. It kind of pains me to say because I'm a Barboza fan. I really like Barboza. He's a longtime fighter. And like Scott touched on, he's been fighting some very tough competition here lately, which I'm not going to hold those losses against him because probably 9 out of 10 fighters would probably lose those same fights. On the other hand, though, EJ is won 5 straight, and he's going to need that momentum here because this is the toughest opponent that he's fought. I do believe that he is up to the task of the pop that he had, and all he has to do to win here, he's got to not let Barboza take advantage of his reach advantage, which isn't always the easiest thing to do. But I do smell an upset brewing here.
Well, I know that he does have a 4-inch reach advantage, just to touch upon your point, and he is 4 inches taller. So that actually does go hand in hand there. The issue that I just have with Barboza is that he is so content with just throwing kicks and keeping it in the stand-up that I think if he potentially catches just one leg kick and takes Barboza to the ground, I think he could sit on Barboza for 5 minutes or so and just simply win a round just by, wrestling. So I think he does have a serious shot of winning a round or 2 just by his superior ground game. I'm not saying that I think he's automatically going to win, but Barboza moving down a weight class makes me believe that he's a little bit, I've never seen him in this weight class before. So I'm a little bit concerned with him being a favorite when he has no experience fighting at the specific weight. And I think that Ige, being the fact that he has fought at this weight before, should have more of an advantage, and I think this should be closer to a pick-em for me. You have any thoughts on that?
To me, it looks like you've got two evenly matched fighters, and you're picking up a little plus value. I don't know. Can you equate it to like to dog racing, where the guys are dropping down a class and should do better at the lower weight class? I don't know exactly how that would work, if that equates.
That's the point, though, is the fact that since people don't really know how well a fighter is going to do when they drop or even when they go up. For example, St. Preux yesterday went up from light heavyweight to heavyweight, and I just thought he would work out, and then he looked slow, and he looked completely disinterested half the time. I mean, he was terrible. I still thought he won the fight, and he ended up not getting the decision. But just because you think a fighter is going to do better at a different weight class doesn't mean that they're actually going to be able to do that because you haven't seen them perform at that weight class. So I think that taking Barboza involves a little bit of a leap of faith just by solely assuming because he's moving down, he's going to perform better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. Willie, you feeling the same thing?
Yeah, I am.
So
Okay.
Edge by decision for me, EJ by decision. I think that for value purpose, I don't think he'll end this fight early. I think this fight should go the distance. EJ has been known to go to decisions a decent amount. And Barboza, even though he's not much of a ground guy, he does have a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I think he should be able to do enough defensively to prevent a submission. So for me, for value, I would take EJ by decision.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on to is this going to be a co-main event, or is this just the last bout leading up to the main event? Scott, do you know?
For this upcoming fight, I'm pretty sure it's 3 rounds.
Okay. All right. So it's the second ladies fight of the evening. This is a strawweight battle between Claudina is actually her nickname, Gadelha. I don't think she quite understands.
That was pronounced. That you pronounced that perfectly. Well done.
Absolutely. I'm getting warm, man. I'm getting warm. And she's like one of those single name Brazilian fighters. She's going up against the United States' very own Angela Overkill Hill, which is it's a fine nickname right there. That's not bad. Not bad at all. And this is the Brazilian is a massive favorite here at minus 200, while Overkill Hill is plus 160. Both of these fighters do have some fights under their belt. Hill is 12-7 in UFC, while Gadelha is 17-4. Scott, are you feeling the favorite right here?
I like Gadelha by decision. And I think if you wanted a safe play here, this fight to go the distance would be heavily juiced. I still love the value, though. I mean, if you look at both fighters, they've gone to decision, each of them, 12 times. So they are no stranger to going the distance here. And the fact that it's 3 rounds should definitely help. Gadelha was actually fighting for titles a little while ago, so she has been one of the best fighters in this class for a long period of time. Now, of course, it's within reason. I mean, she had to go against Joanna twice. She had to fight against Esparza, who fought a couple of, I'd say last weekend, I think. And, yeah, so she's going up against some decent fighters. I'm not saying Angela Hill's bad by any means. I just think Gadelha is significantly better. And I think that since both fighters have gone to decision 12 times, I think this fight is basically a lock to go to a decision. And for me, Gadelha is the better fighter. So I'll take Gadelha by decision.
All right. Well, are you still feeling that? Gadelha is the number 6 contender in the women's strawweight division, has definitely has some marquee bouts on her resume. Do you think she's just going to outclass Angela Hill here?
I'm actually on the underdog here. I really do feel like this fight could go either way, but Hill's carrying a ton of momentum here. She's won 3 straight, as well as 4 of her last 5, and 2 of those wins came via way of a technical knockout. I think her 12-7 record doesn't really do her justice. We've seen her look like a bully when she's in control of fights, and I think that she has what it takes to get the job done here. She only has a 1-inch reach advantage, but she has a 6.5-inch leg reach advantage, and I think that's going to end up making a difference here.
I think I think the main issue though that I have with Hill in this fight is just her lack of a ground game, which I think is a terrible part of this matchup. Hill has 0 wins by submission, 2 losses by submission, and Gadelha is phenomenal when it comes to wrestling. If you want to break down Gadelha's stats with regard to submissions, she has 0 submission losses and 7 submission victories. And she's going up against somebody who has 0 submission wins and 2 submission losses. So I think from a matchup perspective, I think Gadelha is just going to wrestle her to death.
I was actually going to bring that up. That kind of stood out to me that Hill has never won a submission battle. What does that mean? If it goes to the ground, it's pretty much over.
I don't think so, because Angela Hill has a pretty good ground and pound, which was evident by how she beat Hannah Cyphers earlier this year back in January.
Well, that's assuming that she can get the top mount, though, and I think Gedalia is just better on the ground, and she'll probably be able to reverse a decent amount of stuff if Hill ends up getting the advantage there. I think that Gedalia did try to do a little bit more stand-up in her last couple of fights, but based on the matchup here, there's a chance she can win by submission, but Gedalia is also trying to improve her stand-up, so she is a little bit more content on trading shots, probably more than she should in this fight. But from a matchup perspective, I can understand that Hill might be a little bit undervalued here. I just think it's a terrible matchup. I think Gedalia, if she gets it on the ground, I think she can sit on Hill for 5 minutes at a time and just easily pick some rounds up with scores. Because the issue that I have is if Hill hypothetically would take Gedalia down, I know Gedalia can reverse it. And the question is, if Gedalia takes Hill down, can Hill reverse it? And I don't think she can. So for me, I think that there's a chance Gedalia wins by sub, but I expect her to win 1 round minimum just by sitting on Hill for about 3 minutes. So I'll take the favorite by decision there.
Okay, very good. And Willie, we're going to have you lead us off with the main event of the evening. It's a heavyweight battle between the number 8 and the number 9 contender, as Great Britain's Alistair Overeem, the Demolition Man, goes up against our very own Walt, the Big Ticket Harris here from the United States. Overeem, you're right, Scott. He is absolutely a grizzled veteran here in the UFC, as he has fought 64 times with a record of 45-18 with 1 no contest, while Harris, well, he's no rookie either, as he's gone 13-7 with 1 no contest in his UFC career. Willie, who do you like here? It looks like the odds have made Walt Harris the favorite at -149 and Alistair Overeem the veteran at +119. Is there any value on the British veteran here in this fight?
See, I'm a fan of Overeem, so I may be a little biased here with this opinion, but I think that he's going to get the job done here. Harris is sort of a one-trick pony. He has no wins by submission. Meanwhile, Overeem in his illustrious career has 23 knockout or technical knockout wins, as well as 17 by submission. I just think that he's the better overall fighter here, and I like the future Hall of Famer here to take care of business.
Yeah, it looks like Walt Harris would love to have this one be a stand-up bout the entire evening, as he has won 100%. That's right. All 13 of his wins have come by way of knockout or TKO. Scott, you find a little value on this one? What do you got for us?
I have a couple of thoughts on this fight. I think Harris is going to win. I like Harris by knockout. I potentially like Harris by knockout in the first round. I expect this fight to be pretty short, if I'm being honest. Overeem definitely looked good against Rosenstruck in his last fight, and he probably should have won before getting a piece of his lip knocked off in the last 5 seconds of that fight. Before he got knocked.
Sorry about that?
Yeah, some of his lip kind of got disconnected from the rest of his lip in the last.
Oh, that doesn't sound good at all.
Yeah, not exactly the greatest photo. I mean, it is if you like gore. But for this fight,
it's tough to eat tacos in this fight too.
Yeah, there's a lot of backstory with Walt Harris and why I'm rooting for him with regard to everything that happened with his family over the course of the last year.
What happened with his family? What happened?
So long story short was that his daughter got kidnapped and murdered. And they had to send out a search party for her for about a month before they eventually found her body. So she ended up passing away, and Walt Harris took a couple of months off to try to cope with that. So this will actually be his first fight since that horrific ordeal. So I am rooting for Harris, to say the least. But in terms of the matchup there, I'm not just taking Harris because of the the sad story that happened with him. At the end of the day, I don't think Overeem should be headlining cards just at this point in his career. He's fought 63 times. I know he used to be a phenomenal fighter back in the day. I think those days have passed. And I think that looking at this fight, Harris, I just think, is better in the stand-up. I think Harris just has more knockout power. And I think Overeem, I do agree, is better in wrestling. I think Harris is just going to come out like a bull in a china shop and just absolutely destroy him. You have seen Harris in his last 2 fights has won by knockout in 50 seconds or less in each of his last 2 fights. I think Overeem's going to get clipped. His chin has been a little bit suspect over the last couple of years for Overeem, which used to be his bread and butter. And I think so many fights have just absolutely weared away at his chin. Either or. His chin isn't what it used to be. I like Harris by knockout. I think he'll win by knockout. And if you wanted to get some extra juice or extra value there, I think Harris knockout first round should be pretty value-based. So I actually disagree with Willie here. I think Harris is going to take his head off.
Does it bother you that Overeem has a 3-inch reach advantage? Is Harris going to be able to get inside and dodge those punches enough to be able to connect on enough big shots to make that knockout happen?
Yeah, reach bothers me if the fighter that has the reach advantage throws a lot of jabs. Because it all really comes down to if the fighter is going to throw a lot of straight punches to try to keep the other fighter at distance. Overeem doesn't do that. Overeem is pretty much not afraid to throw constant crosses and constant hooks. He's not really much of a jab guy. So I think even though he has a reach advantage, I expect him and Harris to just come towards each other, and then eventually they're just going to start swinging. So if Overeem was more willing to throw jabs, I think that would definitely play a factor in the reach. But he doesn't. And I think Willie can agree with me on that since he is a big Overeem guy. Overeem has never really been a big jab guy. So I think that Harris should be able to just charge forward, close the distance, and I think you're going to see both these fighters trading punches as soon as possible.
All right, Willie, and how do you see this fight? I know that you said you liked Overeem in this fight. How do you see it breaking down? How do you see this fight going? What kind of battle do we have to look forward to?
Well, like Scott said, Overeem's he's used to fighting with a reach advantage, but he doesn't like to take advantage of it very often. Yeah, he doesn't mind to go toe to toe with people, which is one thing. That's one thing that I really like rooting for him in is just the fact that he is not afraid of anyone or anything, and he's also been notoriously hard to knock out in his career. But I mean, granted, he is getting older. He is definitely past his prime, if you will. But if you're looking for some value here, I would find a total and bet the under because there's no way that this fight goes deeper than probably 2 or 3 rounds.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I like Harris in 1 round. I think this fight's going to be over quickly. And Overeem, I mean, I feel like Willie just touched on it. He's very entertaining, but I feel like not taking advantage of a reach advantage is probably one of the worst things you could possibly do against Walt Harris. So for that reason, I'm kind of leaning to Harris there.
This is a 5-round bout, right?
It's scheduled for 5 rounds. I think it could be 3 rounds and it would be the same outcome.
Yeah, they've got the under. You can catch a little value, but it is 1.5, so it's under 1.5 at plus 115.
Yeah. Actually, one thing I do want to touch on, since DraftKings actually does have the exact method available for the Gedalia fight and the Harris fight, you can probably find better lines in the future, but other books like FanDuel and FoxBet haven't uploaded those yet. As of right now, Gedalia by decision's minus 112. A Gedalia by submission, though, is plus 600, so I think there is some potential value there if you wanted to take a flyer. Harris by KO on DraftKings is minus 125. So wow. I'm not saying that that's worth it. That's definitely probably not worth it. But Harris by KO in the first round is plus 260. I'm going to wait around and try to find a better line in the future from other books. But according to DraftKings and their lines, they definitely think Harris should win by knockout pretty much in the first round. And
that's not much of a disparity there between minus 150 and minus 125 for the knockout. So
yeah, I feel kind of the same way, where I think that I agree with DraftKings that I think Harris should win by knockout in the first round. I'm not going to take plus 260. I'll easily wait around to see if I can get a potential plus 400 or so somewhere else. But according to the book so far, in the minimal amount of size that I've found, just on DraftKings and nobody else, it seems like they're in agreement that Harris should pretty much take Overeem's head off in the first 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, guys, we've made it all the way through the main card and the preliminary card as well. Willie, I'm going to put your feet to the fire there. Give us your favorite play of the night. Give us the one that folks should zero in on and maybe take a little extra sniff.
Well, Probably Kevin Holland. I'm kind of like Scott in the fact that I don't just have the strongest feel about this entire card, but I really feel strongly about Kevin Holland. Him or Baeza.
Okay. Of course, Holland, you're catching pretty good value there at minus 110, and Baeza is a little bit more of a prohibitive favorite at minus 210, but you might look situationally there and see if you can pick up some value. All right, very good tips. Scott, what you give us your couple give us your favorite one or your favorite two plays of the night.
So my favorite play is going to be Harris by knockout against Overeem in the main fight. I know that Willie was on Overeem for this fight, but at the end of the day, I think not taking advantage of a reach advantage against a very, very motivated fighter and probably an emotional fighter is definitely not something you should try to do, is go toe-to-toe with Walt Harris. I think Harris is going to knock him out within 5. So for me, I'll lean to Harris there by knockout. I mean, that's at minus 125 on DraftKings. However, I'm not going to take that number. I'm going to wait and try to see if I can find a better number to bet. So I'm personally not going to be touching that. In terms of the other fights in the card, it's kind of a toss-up here based on value and I think the fight itself. But I think Ferreira by submission against Mays in the first fight, I think definitely has some value to it. So those would be probably my two. I'm not as fully confident on Ferreira, but I think whatever price you should get by submission there, considering the fact that he was roughly plus 120 and he's a submission expert, I think that's definitely a way that you should look.
Okay, very good. All right, guys. Well, thanks very much.
You have any thoughts? You have any thoughts on your favorite play of the card, so to speak?
You know what? I really don't. I think it should be an entertaining bout. And again,
it's a good card. It's an entertaining.
What's that?
It's an entertaining card from a viewing perspective.
Yeah, I'm still learning the sport here, so I don't want to present myself as some sort of an expert. I'm kind of still in sponge mode. I like listening to both of you guys talk. I like the fact that you have different opinions on a couple different fights, and I can kind of see how you break them down, what your methodology is. So, you know what? At this point, I really don't. I like from what I've seen. I like what you guys were talking about Song Yadong. I think you do have a superstar in the making there.
I can't believe he was 22. That shocked me. I thought he was like 26.
Yeah, and I know one of the things I have learned is that is really young for the UFC. And it's really young to have that many fights under your belt in a sport where being in your late 30s or even early 40s is not unheard of. So it seems like there's a bit of a path to get to the actual UFC itself, and it seems like he has kind of rocketed through a lot of the preliminary steps, if you will, to be where he is at 22. So I'm always looking for value on the up-and-comer. I know you're laying a pretty good price there with Song Yadong, so maybe kind of look at a method for that fight and see if you can pick something that you like in that fight.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, by the way, those are, my value play was on Ferreira. I actually do have some other thoughts, though. I do like Gedalia beating Hill. I know that there's some juice there, but if we're talking about a safe play, I like a 2-pick parlay on Gedalia to win as well as Elkin's fight to go to decision. Those are two heavily juiced, but I really just think both are going to happen. I think Elkin's almost a lock to go to a decision just based on how those two fighters have fought in the past. And I think Gedalia is just a much better fighter than Hill. So I would also throw in a 2-pick there.
All right. Very good. Very good. And, it should be a lot of fun. Like I said, we think this is going to be on ESPN. The entire card is going to be on ESPN for Saturday night. So buckle in. I know in a lot of the United States it's going to be rainy on Saturday night. I know here in the Midwest we're going to be having some storms. So good night to watch some fights. Good night to keep an eye on that live line as well. Hey, Willie, thanks for joining us here, man. It was fun to break it down, and appreciate your insights as always.
Oh, yeah, pleasure to be back.
All right, man. Very, very good. And what's Willie, anything coming up with esports? Any seasons getting ready to fire up?
Not quite yet. We're kind of in the weird down period where there's not a lot going on outside of Counter-Strike. And Counter-Strike's lines are real baseball-y in the sense that you've got to lay a lot of juice a lot of times. So.
Right. All right. Very good. Very good. Well, boys, we've had a lot of fun. Scott and I are going to be back tomorrow with our friend Joe Duffy there from Atlanta, Georgia. And we're going to be having a show that I know a lot of people have been waiting for. We're going to talk about where the various leagues stand in regards to getting going again vis-a-vis the coronavirus. So we're going to see who's got plans of how those plans are. I know we're going to be talking probably a lot about the MLB, and there could be even some movement that happens today in the MLB situation there as the owners and players thrust and parry with the various arrangements that have been come up with there. So we'll see how that all turns out. Talk a little bit about the NFL and some of the maybe NCAA football. Some leagues may be playing, some leagues may not be playing. It should be an interesting season to say the very least. We'll be back tomorrow to take a look at that with Joe Duffy. But until then, I am Scott Steen. He is Scott Reichel. He is also Winning Willie. And we are the gentlemen from winnersandwhiners.com. Don't forget to stop by. Check out all the great content over there at winnersandwhiners.com. And, man, there is some good stuff over there. You know, I know a lot of people out there, you're not thinking about sports. You know, you figure, well, you know, we're not putting any content out. But, man, they are churning out a bunch of good stuff, a lot of interesting things on the UFC, on previews as far as baseball, basketball, everything. You know what? We are cautiously optimistic that we're going to go forward with at least some of the sports here. So check out our material over there at winnersandwhiners.com and our sister site, statsalt.com as well. So until tomorrow, you guys, everybody out there, stay well, stay healthy. You know what? I always tell you to stay home, but go ahead and start to get out a little bit. See how that's going. Get yourself some sunlight. Get out there and soak in that vitamin D. And, you know, God willing, we're going to all get through this together and see sports before you know it. All right, you guys take care. Have a great day. And we'll be back tomorrow. It's going to be Friday, everybody. Thank God it's Friday. And we'll be back tomorrow to talk a little bit more about sports on Today in Sports Betting. You guys take care. Have a great day. See you next time. Bye-bye.